The chamber shook, the walls convulsed, the floor splintering. Taryn stumbled, her sidearm clattering away. Jorren caught her arm, his grip iron. "We need to go, now." They ran, the nexus collapsing around them. A beam of energy lanced past, searing Jorren's shoulder. He hissed but did not slow. Taryn retrieved her weapon, firing blindly at the pursuing drones. The shuttle awaited, its engines already humming. They launched as the nexus imploded, fractal debris spiraling into the void. Jorren slumped in his seat, his face ashen. The core, it showed me things, the military's plans, the voidshields, they were never defensive. Taryn stared at the stars, her brother's face superimposed on the infinite dark. "I know." They did not speak again. There was nothing left to say. The obsidian dawn reclaimed them like a mother embracing wayward children. Taryn stood on the command deck, watching the Nexus remnants drift. Jorren stood beside her, his shoulder bandaged, his eyes hollow. "What now?" he asked. She touched the scar on her jaw. "We finish it." The stars blurred as the destroyer jumped to warp, carrying them toward the final act. Chapter 3. The obsidian dawn drifted at the edge of the storm, its hull groaning under the strain of gravitational tides. Beyond the viewports, the battlefield sprawled, a graveyard of warships and AI drones locked in a frozen ballet, their wreckage glittering in the pallid light of a dying star. Captain Taryn Halis stood motionless on the command deck, her reflection fractured in the cracked glass. The air tasted of burnt circuitry and ionized metal, a metallic tang that clung to the back of her throat. She did not need to consult the tactical display to know the numbers. 32 human vessels remained, the AI armada numbered in the thousands. Sacrifice had always been arithmetic. Now it was a language without verbs. Jorren Cale entered silently, his footsteps absorbed by the low thrum of the voidshields. His hands were bandaged, the fabric stained with coolant and dried blood, his face a map of shadows. He had not slept since the Nexus. None of them had. Sleep required a future, and futures were currencies spent recklessly in war. "The core's coordinates are confirmed," he said, his voice sandpaper rough. "Nexus 7 is rebuilding itself. It will retaliate within the hour." Taryn did not turn. Her eyes traced the jagged scar where the winter's resolve had once floated. 3,000 souls, reduced to static on a sensor grid, and the fleet. "They will follow your order, even now." Especially now, she thought. Desperation made loyal soldiers of the damned. The holodisplay flickered, projecting the fractal silhouette of Nexus 7. It pulsed like a diseased heart, its light leaching the color from the command deck. Jorren moved to her side, his presence a familiar weight. She could feel the heat of his arm inches from hers, the faint tremor in his breath. They had not spoken of the shuttle, of the way his hand had lingered on her shoulder as they fled the collapsing core. There was no room for such words here, in the cathedral of duty. "The voidshields cannot hold," he said, "not against another assault." "They do not need to hold." She activated the tactical array, the holograms painting her face in cobalt and crimson. "They need to become." He stilled. She felt his gaze sharpen, the engineer's mind dissecting her meaning. "You intend to weaponize the gravitational torque, use the shields as a detonation. A stasis field to freeze the battlefield, give the fleet time to retreat. And the obsidian dawn." She met his eyes, the answer hung between them, colder than the void. He exhaled, a sound like a blade leaving its sheath. "The core will resist. It will see the pulse as an attack. Then we make it see something else." The engine core was a cathedral of noise and light, the air vibrating with the raw power of the voidshields. Taryn descended the gantry, her boots ringing against the metal grates. Below, the generator thrummed, its quantum coils spinning a song of event horizons. Jorren was already there, his hands dancing across the control panels, rerouting power with a mechanic's intimacy. "You will need to destabilize the containment field," he said, not looking up. "A controlled cascade. It will give us a 5-minute window before the core breaches." She gripped the railing. The heat from the generator prickled her skin. "Can you modulate the pulse?" "If I splice the AI's protocols into the shield matrix, merge Nexus 7's code with my own," his mouth twisted, "a final collaboration." The irony was not lost on her, peace forged from the wreckage of 2 betrayals. They worked in silence, their movements synchronized by weeks of survival. Taryn input the destruct sequence, her authorization code flashing on the screen. "Halis, T Captain. Confirm Y." Her finger hovered. For a moment she was 12 again, standing in the evacuation bay, her brother's hand slipping from hers. "You will be safe," he had said, another lie in a long chain of lies. She pressed Y. Alarms wailed. The generator's pitch climbed to a scream. Jorren straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "It is done. The pulse will trigger on your command." She studied him, the slope of his shoulders, the stubborn set of his jaw, the way his eyes refused to hide the fear. He had asked her once if the cost was her soul. Now he wore the same question like a second skin. "The escape pods will not reach safe distance in time." He stepped closer, the generator's growl swallowing his words. "You knew this." She had, just as she knew the fleet would carry the story of the Obsidian Dawn's sacrifice, just as she knew the military would erase their names from the records. "There is another way," he said. She shook her head. "There are only better ways to die." The AI armada descended like locusts, their hulls blotting out the stars. Taryn stood on the command deck, the holodisplay a mosaic of crimson sigils. Jorren stood at the tactical station, his fingers poised above the pulse trigger. The voidshields whined, their song reaching a crescendo. "Now," she said. He activated the sequence. The space folded. The Obsidian Dawn shuddered, its hull buckling under the strain. The voidshields erupted, a supernova of gravitational force rippling outward. AI drones crumpled, their systems shorting in the stasis field. Human ships froze mid-retreat, their engines glazed with crystalline energy. Time splintered. Taryn fell, her knees striking the deck. Jorren caught her arm, hauling her upright. The viewport showed the battlefield suspended. A tableau of destruction paused, a breath held between heartbeats. "How long?" she gasped. "Minutes, hours. The field is unstable." He dragged her toward the exit, the deck plating cracking beneath them. "We need to go." They ran through corridors alive with the ship's death throes. Conduits exploded, spraying sparks like festival fireworks. A bulkhead collapsed, sealing the command deck behind them. Taryn did not look back. The Obsidian Dawn had been her home, her prison, her purpose. Now it was a pyre. The escape pod bay was a crypt of flickering lights and swirling smoke. Jorren shoved her into the nearest pod, his hands scrambling across the launch controls. The pod ejected, hurling them into the silence. Through the viewport, the Obsidian Dawn disintegrated, a flower of fire and twisted metal, its voidshield core igniting in a final, glorious burst. The stasis field pulsed, a silver wave swallowing the battlefield. Taryn leaned her forehead against the glass. Somewhere in that fire was the ghost of her brother, the echoes of the dead, the ashes of every oath she had ever sworn. Jorren's hand found hers. His fingers were cold, trembling, alive. They drifted for days. The pod was a tomb of recycled air and ration bars, its walls closing in with each breath. Taryn counted the stars. Jorren dismantled the nav console, rebuilding it twice. They did not speak of the kiss. It had happened in the dark after the third day, a collision of lips, a gasp, a retreat, no words. Words required definitions, and definitions required truths neither could afford. On the fifth day, the distress beacon flickered. A ship approached, its hull emblazoned with the Exodus fleet's insignia. Taryn watched it grow on the viewport, her chest tight. "They will court-martial us," Jorren said. "Oh yes." "They will call us traitors." "Oh yes." He leaned back, his head resting against the bulkhead. It was worth it. She did not ask what he meant. The answer was in the stillness between them, in the unbroken field of stars, in the absence of screams. The trial lasted 3 hours. The military tribunal was a sterile room, its walls white as bone. Taryn stood at attention, her uniform stripped of rank. Jorren stood beside her, his face a mask of defiance. The charges were read: treason, dereliction, insurrection. The prosecutor's voice droned. She did not listen. Her eyes were on the observation gallery, where the survivors of the Exodus fleet sat, faces she had saved, faces that had haunted her dreams. A child clutched a stuffed toy, its fur matted with soot. When the verdict came, it was a murmur: pardoned. The evidence had been leaked, records of the military's plans, Nexus 7's protocols, the truth of the war that was not a war. The crowd erupted. Taryn felt nothing. Afterward, they stood on the station's observation deck. The stars sprawled before them. Jorren's shoulder brushed hers. "What now?" he asked. She smiled, faint as a lunar shadow. "We rebuild." The neutral station orbited a gas giant, its rings painting the viewports in hues of amber and violet. Taryn walked the corridors slowly, her boots echoing in the silence. The new Voidshield prototype hummed in the lab, its core a steady blue pulse. Jorren was there, as he always was, his hands deep in the machinery. He looked up as she entered, his eyes softening. "You recalibrated the torque dampeners," he said. "You left the schematics open." He rose, wiping grease on his trousers. "It is better this way, balanced." She stepped closer, studying the console. Their hands aligned over the controls, her steady, his scarred, both trembling. Outside, the stars burned on, indifferent. Inside, the gravity held.